If you got this wrong, I'm very disappointed in you. You can get this. This is a very hard question, but it's super easy if you know how the SAT works, if you know the rules of the game. Look at the choices. What do we see? We see verbs in different tenses, but more specifically, we see singulars and plurals, right? Underlies, singular verbs end in S, so that's singular. Is a singular verb. It also ends in S. Underlie, no S, so plural. And has, also a singular verb, also ends in S. So what do you think the answer is going to be? Probably C, because it's the only plural. Now when we go to the sentence, we have an idea of what we're expecting to happen, so it's much more likely we won't get tricked by all the other possible subjects of the sentence. We're looking for the subject of the verb that is plural, right? So we know what we're expecting. So let's take a look. It's a long sentence. In her 1983 book, The Managed Heart, Commercialization of Human Feeling, sociologist Arlie Russell Hochschild first explored at length her conception of a sociology of emotions. The idea that the various cultural and ideological frameworks a person has internalized underlie each emotional reaction that person has within a situation. So at the very least, you got to cross out the parentheses, right? It's obvious that doesn't matter. But where is the subject of the sentence, right? Because we do have a sentence, but then it kind of ends with this dash, right? This is weird. So the first sentence is kind of over. It's almost like they were using the dash in this way, like a colon. It's not really a colon. I guess yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's a colon. So I'll explain why in a second. But basically, what's happening here is we have our actual sentence in the beginning. The sociologist Hochschild first explored at length her conception of a sociology of emotion. So we have a subject and a verb. We have a subject and a verb here, but basically now what we're using is like kind of a description. So this is a colon where we are kind of answering a question, right? Like, what is the conception of a sociology of emotions? Like, what is that, right? Well, it's the idea that the various cultural and ideological frameworks a person has internalized underlie each emotional reaction. This is really sneaky because it's still subject-verb agreement, but it's not behaving in a normal subject-verb sentence way. It's not really a sentence here, but we do have a subject to go with this verb. The frameworks, right? So we can kind of boil this down. The word that, actually, to add in even more complexity, the word that is kind of allowing us to have our own new subject-verb pair that exists within the that clause. Okay, it's kind of like a descriptive clause, but when we have those, we don't always have them, but we often have another subject and verb that's not quite a sentence, but that could, in a way, be its own sentence, right? If I ignored everything else and just focused on the that clause, the various cultural and ideological frameworks a person has internalized underlie each emotional reaction, right? So there's a subject and verb there. That could be its own sentence, but it's within other things, and that clause is kind of making it dependent, so it's messy, but that's how it's behaving. So it's the frameworks, and sure enough, that's plural, that matches with our plural verb. Now, if you are confused by that, fine. It's confusing. It's a very confusing sentence. It's messy. It's not hard. It's not easy to follow. We're also using a verb that you might not be super comfortable with. The verb underlie is very tricky, but it doesn't behave in any different way than any other verb. We still think about it in terms of singulars and plurals. And because I know the rules of the game, I know that if I see one plural and three singulars on a question, it's very likely that the plural is the answer. It might not always be the case. I am sure at some point I will be making one of these videos and being like, hey, here's an exception to the rule that I've said 100 times. But for 100 times, if we've got a rule that works very, very well, we should follow it, even if we're not sure what's going on, right? If we have no other evidence suggesting that it's going to be a singular verb here and that it's going to break that rule, we should stick to the rule. 3 versus 1. Right? We've got 3 singulars, we got 1 plural. Pick the plural. Even if you have no idea what else is going on, it's a safe bet. It's probably right.